Yes. Without any further ado, let's talk about our next speaker, Dr. Jerell Hill. He's coming out of the West Coast as well. He's absolutely phenomenal. He's going to really unpack a couple of things as it relates to like institutionalized, the things that we've been talking about with the systematic racism, education, and everything else that he has to offer. So without further ado, everybody, drop some 7, shake your keys, give it up for Dr. Jerell Hill. It's your show.
See you. Let's go. Turn them up.
How's everyone doing? Can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Very good. Thank you. Again, I just want to thank David and Brandy for hosting. This isn't something that they just put together in light of the recent events. This is something we talked maybe 4 months ago. I feel like January, February. So I really applaud you guys for what you're doing with the movement here. The other thing I really want to shout out to is Sean Ross. My brother Sean Ross is a really instrumental part of me being on the panel as well. I do have some of my esteemed guests, my aunties, are listening in. My first auntie is an apostle and a pastor, Mary Holland. They're calling from Kentucky, and I just want to make sure I put them in their place of honor as well. Also, my other auntie is evangelist Eva Barnes, who's in the building as well. So I just want to make sure I acknowledge their presence as we're here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, if I can have these options here. One second here. Can you guys see my screen?
So, Dr. Hill, if you go into StreamYard, at the bottom, you should see where it says share screen. Do you have
now, can you see it now? It says I'm sharing it.
Yep, you got it.
Okay, excellent.
Right.
Is that on there now? Can you guys see that now, the PowerPoint? No? Give me 1 second. Let me see if I can have this. There we go. You guys see that okay? David, can you guys see this okay now? Just want to make sure because we're on live. Oh, we can see it.
Yeah,
Okay,
you're good. You're good to go. You're good to go. You can see
okay.
it.
All right. All right, so I'm going to get into why your education matters. I just want to walk you through some of the possibilities that we'll explore today and why it's important to continue to educate yourself, even when you are in an entrepreneurial space. A little bit of background about me. I have my doctorate in education with a focus in leadership and management. So I definitely understand what it's like. I applaud all the new bosses of the next generation that are here. So that focus has really helped me hone in on balancing both. To be a successful entrepreneur, you definitely have to balance out your management and your leadership. So these are just some of the guiding questions that we'll go through as we walk through this presentation. Really defining what your business model is, what's your company status, what resources are available. And again, some of you guys can see this here, but what's really important is looking at the SWOT analysis, because a lot of times people don't have evaluations on their business. So What I mean by that is there can be an appraisal done on your business before you even enter into some investment strategies. What's really important too is looking at your executive summary and identifying your goals. You have to continue to control your narrative. I'd be remiss not to acknowledge some of the past practices of, we know, the legendary Black Wall Street being able to control the narrative back in the 1920s before the massacre. But if you can see kind of the breakdown, that's kind of a present day strip mall where you have movie theaters, grocery stores. So a blueprint has already been established. But as you're developing your own plans, you want to control the narrative. I don't know how familiar you are with, people heard of FedEx and Amazon, but they have some similarities. They both have arrows. There's an arrow between the E and the X for FedEx, and there's an arrow underneath Amazon. And what that arrow really indicates to me is a lot of times we get information after the fact and we call that feedback. But in this mindset, when you have a growth mindset, you want feed forward. So what you really want to have is feedback or information to move you forward, not necessarily repairing what you missed from some of the opportunities. So obviously, when you look at controlling the narrative, you got to see how you're conceiving the story and how that's being interpreted by the reader or the potential investor. So at the top right, you see that where you have to understand the media outlet is where kind of being the mediator between you and your message. So it's important that you actually control your own narrative. In a perfect world, this is what it looks like. You've done the research, you've identified what works, you've implemented what works, and you've improved your outcomes. But sometimes in a perfect world, this is 3 different leadership quotes. Every time you have to speak, you are auditioning for leadership. The task of a leader is not to get their people from where they are, but where they've not been, right? That's, again, Henry Kissinger. And the last one, I follow Peter Drucker a lot. Management is not doing things right. Leadership is doing the right thing. But also Peter Drucker has another famous quote that I love, and he says, strategy will eat culture for breakfast, or culture will eat strategy for breakfast, meaning that if you haven't addressed the cultural implications, you can have the best strategies and you'll be eaten alive. So keeping that in mind, you want to make sure that you have that in focus. But here is the actual reality that we all face, regardless of your specific entrepreneurial industry. This is kind of the crazy roads. This looks like the LA freeways once we get post-COVID and back to our normal lives. But at the center of that is policy. So if we're not paying attention to policies, regardless of what kind of research we're doing, policies at the end is kind of at the center of what we do. It really impacts your community input, your professional judgment, your values, local data, your research, and your funding. They all are tied to policies. So even as an entrepreneur, the educational piece is you understanding the rules of engagement for your particular industry. Like I said, I'm doing this in a broad sense because I don't know your specific business model, but I'm trying to give you some principles that work regardless of your industry. So the other part is your implementation capacity. I know, with our thing with keys, the implementation plan definitely has to be really sound, but it has to be tied to policies so that you have practices that are aligned to policies so that you actually can have the desired outcomes that you want. But again, that really requires your professional judgment. As an entrepreneur, you sometimes are both. You're the management and the leadership, right? So we'll dive deeper into that, but this is kind of the current reality of so many things going up against each other, and you have to find those intersections, right? So the big part of finding the intersections will allow you to really put your product or your brand in the center, right? At some point, you want your brand to actually reflect policies that are supportive of what your outcomes are. Here's a really good graphic where at the top you see responsibility. So your ability to respond is the leadership part. And then we have obviously responsibility where you're called to task, coming up with plans. And then as a leader, you have to operationalize the vision and come up with the steps. So that's kind of the mixed message when you see management or leadership versus management. You're going to focus on people. It looks outwards. You articulate visions for the future. A leader definitely empowers. You create change, does the right things, influences, trusts and develops, and understands conflict. A lot of successful businesses learn how to endure or have that grit we talk about when it comes to conflicts. So, and you have to be ready to embrace your ability to respond to those will make or break your business, regardless of the industry that you're in. Also looking at tasks as your responsibility on the management side is focused on tasks. You're going to execute plans. You find ways to come up with your controls. You direct. Again, you still do things right. And if you can see the difference, it's the same thing when they talk about winners take all. You see that winners don't do different things. They do things differently. And that's kind of the intersection between your management and leadership. And also when you're management driven, you are really good what we call serves superordinates. That's your vertical relationships. But sometimes you might neglect your horizontal relationships. So you're good with investors. And one of the keys I want to drop with you is I don't want people to be validation addicts. And what I mean by that is I don't want you to always compromise what your brand is trying to seek validation from an investor. So sometimes you have to still stick with what your plan is. And that's a part of building the trust and develop and influence, right? When you can influence, you really don't have to compromise. You can adapt, but that doesn't mean you're seeking validation. So those are two separate things. Here's the industry focus, as the research shows, with a lot of Black businesses, people of color go in these specific areas: business services, health, beauty, and fitness, food, restaurant, general retail, and other. We definitely, we see 5 major locations: Texas, Georgia, California, Florida, and North Carolina. But what I want to draw your attention to is the wealth gap. On the left is pretty much the maximum levels that a lot of minority-owned businesses create. But the research shows that most of the receipts within 12 months only total about $54,000 within 12 months, as opposed to the white counterparts who make in roughly $550,000. So you see that almost a little over $300,000 wealth gap. Also, just a report out of The Economist came out, and they showed that every white dollar is only 8 cents in the Black community. So I remember hearing as a kid that you had to work, 10 times as harder to get, half as far. So what that's telling me now, I have the evidence to see what the elders were saying when they shared that with me as a kid, is that 8 cents is actually, you need $12.50 to match one white dollar of wealth. So you definitely have to have something special about what you're doing to even the playing field, so to speak. So like I said, this is a really interesting graphic, and this is where the research has to happen. Why is the wealth gap so different? There's a lot of commonality in minority-owned businesses where you're looking at specific industries. We definitely like entertainment and products, but again, we have to look at where the other businesses are. Some of the do-gooder work that I always consult with. Like I said, I've worked with a lot of entertainers and athletes, setting up foundations and helping them with their goodwill missions, so to speak. So again, that other is what's encapsulating those other business opportunities. Here's one of the big concepts. And again, W.B. Du Bois said this quote: either America will destroy ignorance or ignorance will destroy the United States. So what this reads to me is ignorance is expensive. So it's we know that businesses fail within 5 years. So how do you prevent that failure? Is through education. So because you will spend a lot of money when you don't have the knowledge, right? Because there's a lot of people who have education, but the knowledge is the wisdom to apply what you've learned. So that's why your education matters. And if anything, take this away. If I were to say one of the big keys, this is it right here in a nutshell in terms of what we need, why education matters. And it doesn't always have to be in an institutionalized setting, right? Because we know that there is some evidence that sometimes school systems and degree programs have some racism. It's systemic racism that happens in a lot of areas. So educating yourself, learning, volunteering with people that are in your target industry is really helpful as well. Here's some other information as I transition over to this next slide. Some of the motivational factors for African Americans to enter business. I like the very first one that's bolded in Black. 62% say they want to pursue their passion, right? Because now you're doing something that you love. And that is working from a really good sense of peace instead of looking down at the bottom because they're being laid off or motivated, right? So I think that passion, and then I love bosses like me as in a leadership capacity. I continue to work with the bosses. So I see them saying that they're ready to be their own boss. Much is given, much is required. And then 30% say that they just like the opportunity presented in itself. So this is kind of the dynamic in which African Americans have motivation to start business. So as you entrepreneurs, you want to pursue your passion. So the idea is, do your deliverables and your business model actually reflect that? And that's something for you to think about. What can I do to make sure that I am articulating that so that people understand exactly what I'm trying to do, right? Because the interpretation is the difference between a successful pitch to get funded or to move your business forward versus someone that can't quite communicate the message properly. So that's something true. Like, I'll give you an example. There's been several business plans that I've read that people say they don't have any competition. When an investor reads that and you say you don't have any competition, what that's saying is you haven't really done the market research. It's okay to have the confidence, but competition, then there's really no market to base it on, right? And then your projections, it gets you down a slippery slope because that leads you to creating a business plan based on futures without a lot of evidence of what that industry actually spends. So again, I just invite you to spend more time taking a look at making sure that your plans and your executive summary accurately reflects what your business is trying to accomplish. A picture is worth 1,000 words, and you guys know the spending power. And this is recent here. By 2021, Black people's spending power is $1.5 trillion. So as an entrepreneur, even if you failed at 99% of that market, you would still be in a $100 million category. So this is a place where even at massive failure, if you have an appropriate business plan, because people are spending money, you still can walk away well into $100 million worth of revenue. But again, that requires the work and having access to specific things to even hit some of these goals that you may have for your business. If you want big impact, you definitely want to educate yourself, right? You want to educate yourself in multiple ways. Sometimes you educate yourself through experience. I'm one of the first people to tell you I've had several business plans fail before I've had them become successful. And that's okay. You just dust yourself off and go on to the next one. But again, if you want a big impact, the impact does come with the education. Success follows experience. So sometimes people write it the other way, thinking that, they're going to get success without the experience. And that can sometimes lead into some problematic situations. So here's some of the other keys when you're looking at taking your business to the next level. 95% of all problems are process problems. So if you haven't quite accomplished your goals, you have to revisit your process from A to Z in terms of where the root causes are to why you haven't gotten to the spaces that you want. Also looking at truth over tradition, because sometimes historitis kicks in. And what I mean by that, we hold on to things that, well, we've always done it this way. As the paradigm is shifted with COVID, we're all at zero. So what we thought worked, we're going to have to go out and learn and unlearn some of the things we are carrying with us. Because again, as you see, some businesses are folding because of the present conditions. So looking at research and being aware of what's around us is important. But what I want to hone in on this particular slide is implementing a continuous improvement model where you're constantly looking for feed forward, where what can I do to improve my process? What have I done in the last 6 months to get myself a cutting edge? What are my short-term benchmarks versus my long-term goals? Being able to really specify that in a business process management system will help you identify where you need to go and how you need to get there. Because a lot of times the answers are within the problem. So everyone is looking for an answer, but some of the answers are lying within the problems. Well, I misstepped here. I didn't have this communicated effectively. I misjudged the market. I didn't anticipate impact variables, a massive shutdown. Those are things sometimes that are out of our control. But as a business owner, you always have to anticipate things from happening that don't go always according to plan. Thinking big, and there's global. I think we don't want to have destination disease. I want to see you stretch out because there's so much opportunity, like in light of what's happening in this current climate. I just wish that people would continue to love our people as much as the culture. I know our culture is one of the biggest exports from the United States abroad. I've had a chance to do a keynote speech down in Peru, and you would be surprised how much they understand African American culture down in Peru. So I was just really would encourage you to think big and stretch out beyond your own bounds, because there's opportunities in places that you may not know. The other thing I can share with you too is, I used to, when I was out a lot doing, several business meetings, and I'm guilty of this too. I could take about 600 business cards and I may only contact 3 of the folks who I've engaged with. So that follow through is important too, going back through those relationships, because as you're an entrepreneur, you're going to need your entire network. Sometimes you're going to have outer circle folks that help you accomplish your goals, because you're not going to be able to complete all the tasks by yourself. If you're a sole proprietorship or an LLC, you're going to rely on outside individuals to help you, because the people that make the policies actually control the dollars. So sometimes those are people that are outside entities that are willing to help you. So I definitely think stretching beyond your own realm and exploring other possibilities on the global setting, which is reviewing. I'm quite sure most people are thinking globally as we're interconnected with technology, but just as a friendly reminder. And here is why, again, education matters. The largest number, again, the GED, high school diploma, about 33% of entrepreneurs have that level. 26% of them are associate degrees, 21% are bachelor's degrees, and 22% have a master's degree or higher. So when you can see the educational breakdown, I actually I want to see that 33% go towards that master's degree level, because that definitely opens the door for more possibilities and funding and more business ventures that would be available with the higher degrees of education. And that, again, that's why it matters, because a lot of times that is definitely a funding indicator. You see that people with those advanced degrees tend to have, greater access to funding and other opportunities. Not saying their plan is better, it's just the knowledge and information. We're in what's called an information economy that is grounded through a function of social media, right? Social entrepreneurship. So it's your relationships that are important. So you have to build connections before correction. So if you build those connections, people will help you along the way, developing sound plans that actually get funded. Also, studying and getting a mentor is really critical in your process or your journey. Having people that are kind of doing work that you see yourself doing and calling them. I know that with me, myself, I still actually call my mentors quarterly and just check in with them to keep them updated on what I'm doing and to still glean from their guidance and support, because again, they may have some ideas that I've overlooked. Because the other thing I can invite you to do is give yourself permission not to know everything, because that'll actually stunt some of your growth. It's okay not knowing, but with not knowing, that means you can locate someone that has the answer. So that is where your network comes into play. And what's important is a SWOT analysis. This is really the critical piece to a sound business plan. The S is strengths, W weaknesses, O opportunities, and T is threats. So this is kind of a project plan formula that has been vetted out for many years. It actually works. If you're not familiar with it, I would invite you to take a look at your business plan and put it into this formula. What investors really want to see is that you've already identified the weaknesses and threats, right? Because all business plans are going to say my model is the best, but we want to be devil's advocate. And I'd be the person to invite you to share that information out first before they find it on their own, because investors will do their own due diligence. And any business model, any business plan that's presented, they're going to go do their own due diligence. So it's better to talk about the threats and weaknesses in a positive way, because then you can always have some kind of solution built into the weaknesses. Sometimes it's just capacity, right? So I'm looking for an investor to expand my capacity so that I can get my product more scalable, because that's what investors are really looking for. can I have 1,000 of these? You're selling 10, but I need to go up to 1,000. How do we make that happen? I'll share a story with you that there are some young kids out here in South LA who actually got spotted by Foot Locker. Their t-shirt designed from their own printing press in their backyard. They were spotted by Foot Locker, and they were handed a purchase order for 140,000 pieces of material to go into Foot Locker. These young kids didn't really know what a purchase order was, but a purchase order is actually cash because that contract from Foot Locker can be redeemed at the bank. So one of my colleagues actually assisted them getting the funding to produce their t-shirts. But again, it's one of those things where this SWOT analysis and your success is being ready when those opportunities come. Like I said, one of the first leadership quotes I shared with you, every day you're auditioning for leadership, and that just happened to work in their favor. And they were actually able to fill the order and still work with them as we speak today. So again, those are things being prepared with this SWOT analysis where they took the initiative, they were selling it locally, they got spotted, and then they had contacts and mentorship. So they were able to get their purchase order solidified, and now they're contractors with Foot Locker. So again, that's a really good story there. Here are some of the reasons why excuses are a prerequisite to failure. At the very top, lack of leadership, no experience, lack of followership. And in the TV monitor, these are some of the things that have just really stood out to me. You know, a family member is not necessarily a business partner, and that's no disrespect to anybody or their family, but sometimes that's a little different when you have that dynamic, because there could be a conflict of interest, too many alphas and no betas, no research. The big one is insufficient funds, failure to adapt, and no consistent vision. If you remember earlier in our discussion, I talked about being a validation addict. If you're a validation addict, you won't have a consistent vision. So that means your vision is susceptible to what someone else's approval is. So that actually is why some businesses don't get failed, because they keep changing their vision, trying to fit in instead of finding the match from the beginning. Also, failure to provide good customer service. That's one of the indicators when you see market research. A lot of small or Black businesses fail because of that customer service angle. Maybe it's late with products. Maybe it's not enough communication. Those are definitely key indicators where goods and customer service will create more of the failure that businesses experience. So here are some of the resources that I have, but I just definitely wanted to make sure that I'm leaving time for our Q&A, because this is more of a dialogue and conversation than just kind of our just me talking at you. But I definitely want to make sure I leave ample time for us to go over questions. So I'm going to stop my screen share right here. And I have if you have any further questions for me, I'm on Twitter at Jerell Hill with the space in between.
Hey, I'm over here dropping keys right and left.
Thank you.
So you obviously have been. How many countries would you say you have traveled to?
Oh man, I've been to several countries. I'd say 15 or so.
15 different countries.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I've been to almost 6 continents. So I've been blessed to go around the world a little bit, a couple times. So yeah, I'm just really honored and humble whenever I get a chance to travel and learn from people from around the world, for sure.
How do you feel like that has broadened your horizons, like your thought process?
That's good. That's a good question for me. I think it is. I think diversity is your biggest strength, but it's also the biggest challenge that we see here in the country. I think it has broadened my horizons to see that people really love our culture. And I'm like, wow, I just see the opportunities abroad. It's like, man, if you go to China, or if you go to places, they really want to engage in business with our people. And I'm like, that is just so fantastic to see on a global scale.
Oh, that's good right there. So how can we as Black people monetize our culture? We see so many other cultures doing it. how can we monetize our culture?
I think one, it's support. Like I said, I just think we have to support each other's business efforts, because sometimes, you know, I had a barber tell me once, he's like, man, people only come to me because they have to. But if the other folks could do the hair and stuff, they wouldn't, you know, they wouldn't even support my business. I think it's support. But what happens in that support is education, right? Because ignorance is expensive. If you have $1.5 billion of spending power and you're buying the wrong things, we've already shown the ability to monetize, but we're not monetizing in our own community. So I think that's really the idea around, you know, that success, right? But I think the education and the process to monetize, like, how do I get my brand in China? There's a process that you have to follow. So that process management, 95% of problems are process problems. If there's something in your process, you're going to be off. And that's where the education comes in, whether you go get an MBA or whatever degree you aspire to, or training. Do you volunteer in a company? Like I said, I've worked with entertainers and athletes, and I volunteered. And those are like, it's a Jay-Z line. I'm gonna give you $1 million worth of game for $9.99.
Right.
You know, those Forbes list folks that do that. And like I said, success is not an act, it's a habit. So you have to get in successful habits to create this environment that you want to see. Because people are spending it. People are spending for sure. So it looks like we need to understand that we have those opportunities, but how do we get ourselves in a position to be seen appropriately and communicating well? Is our vision consistent? Right? That's anybody that's successful, they're consistent. They know Nike is a swoosh. FedEx got the arrow. That's not going to change. They're feeding forward. That's the whole point of coming up with that consistent vision. And over time, you should yield those results.
You drop it. Let me get one more question in, B, before you go.
Go ahead.
Questions. I'm writing them down.
You guys know how I feel about you too, so y'all can fire away. I love it.
Okay, man. We got some time with you, man.
Drop your questions in the chat.
We going. So you said ignorance is expensive, and we know how important education is. How do we balance as a community education versus being strapped by debt? Because, you know, Black women have the highest student loan debt out of any other, you know, ethnicity, gender, anything. So how do we balance those two out by getting those higher degrees and things versus the whole debt that straps us?
You know, I think there's a lot of opportunity as we see the recent events for institutions. Like I know in my institution, we just gave 2 graduate degrees scholarships, $60,000 scholarships to men of color to enter the teaching profession. So I think just the Brody Foundation was really wonderful working with us to do that. There is so much grant dollars as you search for them to cover your education. As we're starting to see a generational opportunity that's present, we're going to have to redefine and create new disciplines in higher education. Because if you had more disciplines that people of color could thrive in, then you would see the enrollment go up. If there's an entrepreneurship degree, like we have a advocacy and social justice pathway into a law degree. So we're trying to figure out what disciplines that people want to study in this current climate. I want to study international business with the focus on, you know, interior design. Like you have to really start to look at, can the disciplines meet the needs, right? The other thing I think our people could do to get out of debt is try to figure out creative ways to fund those ventures. When you volunteer and you work with other organizations, sometimes they'll pay you to go to school. You either learn to pay it or they'll pay you to learn it. And that's where that information economy comes into play. Where is this information? It's somewhere buried that people aren't readily applying for because they give millions of dollars away every year. And you see it like, well, how am I taking the time to go through the process to learn where those funds are coming from and how do I access it? And that's where the information with technology, that should give you an opportunity to do that. Sometimes you can fill out, like the SBA program, you can fill out that application on your phone. So the technology, it's readily available for you to access.
That's that first key. That's that first key.
Right
we
on the same page, B.
We always on the same page.
That's that first key.
The first key. So you
buy the ebook. You guys go to the vendor store, Keys of Black Wealth, and buy that ebook. The first key is being aware.
Financial awareness. So this is exactly what you're talking about, Dr. Hill. I mean, if you're not aware, you don't even understand. I mean, access is not even going to be a possibility if you're not even aware. Like, so there's that first key. That's why that first key of wealth building is awareness.
Absolutely. I like it. I like that for sure.
You said so much. The entrepreneurship degree, the process, the SWOT analysis, those are keys, like major keys. And so funny, again, I like to draw on experiences, like to lead by example. And one thing that we do as well in our organization is we have those processes in place. And they truly do guide you. They give you this foundation that you can, lie your principles and your mission on. So if you have that foundation and your principles can rest on that, when adversity takes place, then you have a stronger chance of being successful and surviving and sustaining as a business. So I wanted you to just expound a little bit more on the importance.
So the SWOT analysis. So I was working with a company who wanted to be one of the first Black women to be Black-owned IPO companies on the stock market. And when I was meeting with the couple, and I was really, really happy to meet with them, they actually didn't recognize to have an appraisal put on their business. So once we got the evaluation done, you get your DUNS number, and some people know some of the outer circle things, but the evaluation done from an outside party, they were actually thinking their company was $5 million. When I said, you guys, we need to run an evaluation because they're going to do a market analysis to see how many companies there's a formula. Make a long story short, when the evaluation came back, their company was evaluated at $1.4 billion. So now you're going to let the data, we're going to let the data guide the conversation. Now, when I go into pitch my business plan, I have an evaluation done by an authentic or a person who's certified to do this. This isn't me saying I'm the best, I don't have any competition. This is a third party saying the same thing. When two or more are present, we agree that is what it is, right?
That part.
So when you have that, that's going to alleviate some of the barriers. Here's my evaluation. So when I'm asking for numbers, they're not too far out of the ballpark. I'm using the data to help you determine what specific areas I need your investment in. The part of the SWOT analysis that I'll hone in on is making sure you have items that are specific to the investor, because you have to find a match. Everybody's not going to do shoes and clothes. So why would you even waste your time going to an investor who's never funded that? That's a part of the education. You're wasting, ignorance is expensive. So you flew out there, you got your credit card bill out, you didn't pick a hotel, you spent $5,000 for a note you could have got in 10 seconds by going on the computer. So if you want to keep spending 10, the airline,
let them know.
Trust me, they'll let you swipe, but you didn't have to if you were going to do the right work ahead of time. Well, my friend, it has to be deeper than just these surface conversations. I need to know the last 10 projects they funded before I even engage. What are they funding? Not that they got money. Yeah, a lot of people have money, but they don't fund the same things.
Right.
You have to find the match, right? You have to find that match. And the SWOT analysis will allow you to do that. But and then I'll give you one more point. You have to really hone in on the weaknesses and threats.
Right.
Nobody likes surprises. If it's your business and you're coming to me sitting in the room and I'm going to tell you about the threats that you didn't tell me. So right away, trust is important when you're talking dollars and investment, right? So if you didn't identify it first, that's going to be a problem. They're going to come back with their research and say, hey, this is what we found. So you might, you should tell, you got to be an open book.
Right.
That's the it's reciprocal accountability. You want dollars and they need the accountability to you.
Reciprocal accountability.
Yeah, that's both ways. So yeah, I hope that answered your question, because
it did.
I tell my people, so I can get turned up when I see you two.
We
almost turned up though.
Right. I was over here dropping keys, shaking and stuff.
Love it. I love it.
Yes, this is what I'm talking about right here.
Let me get a question in. I know. We got like 12 minutes left.
We forgot about the chat though.
I know. We forgot about the chat. We being selfish right now. We asking all our questions. Let me go to the chat, because you did this. Somebody did ask a good question. Question: how much attention do you dedicate? So this is from Sierra Hillsman. Question: How much attention do you dedicate towards building cultural competency when it comes to your brand's consistent vision, especially when it comes to trying to market your business mission to other parts of the world?
Oh, that's a great question. The first thing I want to start with is I think that is probably, that's the Peter Drucker, culture we eat strategy for breakfast. So cultural competency is a really high mark. And what I mean by that is we could appear to be the same. Like we can't use culture as a descriptive, oh, you're just African American. I have family in different parts of the country, but culturally we're different. Right. So cultural competency, this isn't an activity. This is a lifelong process. So it's really culturally intelligent. So if I'm going out of the country, I'm going to spend the first 10 months trying to understand what they're doing and their habits. It's the same thing that you do. Facebook or any company, they study human behavior. So the part of being culturally intelligent, study their behaviors. How much do they spend? Their income is different. When you travel, Peru is 3 to 1. So every dollar is $3 down there. So you're going to have a little bit more long-term impact with your products down there because your dollar is going to go further. Right. So you're going to spend 10 months. Like, don't move with hate. Right. Some people that move fast without a plan, that's a recipe for disaster.
Right.
So the idea is to take your time to learn it. Right. You don't need to be in a rush. Success sometimes requires patience. If I do it right because what if I rush and get down there and I'm taking things just off the surface? That's an expensive trip to go down there. And then again,
expensive.
Ignorance is expensive.
I mean, I've seen, my gosh, it's the same thing. Like when we open up a box, I'll do an illustration. We're putting a do-it-yourself project together and we don't open the instructions. We get to the part, the drawers are almost put in and one is slanted. Now I'm going to go back and spend the 3 hours trying to figure out how to unpack what I just did. But it's just, and we're all guilty of it, but that's just showing you we just have to pay attention and be more reflective. But to answer the question, I'd spend a lot of time trying to understand the culture. It's Stephen Covey, seek to understand than to be understood. I need to understand you. It's not about me when I'm selling a product. I'm consumer facing. It's the same thing when like BlackBerry, everybody knows their story, right? When they didn't want to go touchscreen, they thought people were going to click. They ignored the consumer data report. The same thing with, I know everybody's heard of those fidget spinners for kids who have ADHD. That expired. The original owners didn't benefit off of it. It was a person watching the patent expire and then they took it and ran with it.
Wow.
So you can imagine that education, we see it. We see it in property, right? Heirs rights. When your family owns fractional ownerships and developers come in underneath you, that systemic racism through the generations of 401 years of this oppressive race we've been in, that heirs, the possibility of you owning 600 acres can be taken away from you because the developer went to the county office and bid. So those are things where the ignorance can lead you. You got to understand the blueprint. So spend time to take the culture if you want a long-term impact. Because remember, most businesses fail within 5 years. So that 5 years is learning. It's not losing, it's learning.
Right.
I love that. I'm waving the keys, man. Like, because we're intentional about that, because even when we were starting this, we were like, we don't want to say African American, because everybody is not going to identify as African American. So it's like, we got to say black, that way we can reach global. It's black people all over the world, and brown people fall under the blackness too. So, we scoop it up all of that. So I love what you're saying right there.
But I love what you just said, because now you've qualified a definition, because everybody's definition of black doesn't read the same way. But I love how you qualify that with, like, this is our global perspective, because we got people that look like us that are in London and New Zealand. When you travel, our people, I mean, they're everywhere. So everywhere. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Yep. So let's see if we got any questions for the chat, because if not, me and David and we're going to take over.
I like it.
There was one. Did you see it? Where did he say that at? There's something about, did you create your own infographics? If so, what software did you use?
Yeah, I see it.
Oh, a lot of the infographics that I have, I do grab a lot of Google slides and make sure it's okay for me to use.
Okay.
But my infographics, some of them I did create. That's just through this is just a PowerPoint. I like those composition notebooks because I carry my own, not just as a PowerPoint, but I just, my life is in this, like a lot of times I have to jot down my notes, but I do grab different infographics. And then when you customize your brand, you can buy software to match your mission and vision. So those are the costs to do business. So a lot of times what I do, I have to customize my presentation for my audience. So that's the part of the research is I don't want them to think I'm doing a boiler template every time. Like I want to customize it to the program of who I'm presenting to. And so that they see that I've done the work, right? Even if I have to go visit their business, I might pay attention to the detail of how their operation works before I even engage. That's a part of me being an entrepreneur.
Right.
So, you know, the education piece is what I do. That's not who I am. So as a consultant, when I work with companies with their do-gooder work, I do the same thing. If I'm asked to put together a presentation for a golf tournament and I'm calling high net worth individuals in, I'm going to go to the golf course.
Right.
Before I present, I want to go down there and talk to the people to see. I want to see the environment, right? So a lot of it is I invite you guys to look at different frameworks within your process management. When do you take time to research? How much time do you commit? Do you know the policy in that business? Because that's the first 5 years of failure, right? People make excuses for why they don't want to do. We're looking for the bag. The bag isn't moving. The bag is you know where it is. The four horses, Wells Fargo, Citibank, Bank of the West. I mean, you know, we know the bag isn't moving.
Right.
We need to align ourselves up to go access the bag.
Yep, go follow it.
It's not trying, the money's not moving. It's at the Federal Reserve. The note you can read, there's a documentary, How Money Works, and I invite you guys to go watch that. That money is not moving. It's in 3 places. And we know where they are. So we have to align our business models to get the qualifications. That's not being a validation addict. I know where the match is. Hey, this person invests in Black businesses. That's who I'm going after. Why? I can take the guesswork out of it. Because a lot of times it's cold calling and just hoping for something to just fall in your lap.
Right.
Already there. Business don't work. It doesn't work.
Right. Strategic alignment.
I don't want to play school with people. I don't want to do that.
Right.
It's like telling you that the degree is going to get you to the funding. The degree is a tool that goes in. That's like your championship rings. My diplomas are my championship rings to get me into these spaces, right? Those are my spinning rims. I just say, this is how I'm going to do mine is this way, right? But I know it's people that laid the foundation for me to get here. So making sure you acknowledge that is a big part of it. But definitely the answer to his question was, you find you can create your own. You can work with a graphic designer to customize your own graphics when you're presenting. So it sets you apart. But it's okay to use the free ones as long as they're allowing you to use it and you're not breaching any copyright. Absolutely. There's times where there's graphics said better than my words. So if it works and it's not too grainy, I'm gonna put it on my presentation. Like, oh, this is great. I'll give you the credit for it, and I'm using it. I'm not monetizing it. I'm giving this out freely. So I hope that answered his question.
Yeah. So hopefully it did. Where do you lecture and stuff at? Like where
do I lecture? So I'm at Pacific Oaks College. I'm actually the interim dean over the School of Education. So I'm training teachers to go out into schools and to support our youth, because there's huge disparities. We can talk school to prison pipeline, lack of educational and economic opportunities. We can't address race without looking at poverty, because there's too much intersection. We've criminalized poverty, and that was a result of some of the brutality that's happening in society. Right, it's the Nas's line is a sweet, honest kid turns illegal for commerce to get his feet out of those Converse. Right?
What?
And when you see that, and I mean, he's a legend. We have to acknowledge those living legends because they have voice. It's like when people, entertainers, we need them. Like this is the great time because they're influence. You see people playing. I heard Ice Cube in them when I was in Peru. I heard Master P in them. I mean, I hear their stuff when I travel. Like, wow, that these people have influence around the globe.
Right.
We can capitalize on that. But lecturing at Pacific Oaks College, but I do get called in to guest speak as invited lecturers at various institutions. So I'm always available to do a lecture if needed. Like I said, I like to be used as a resource. As you guys know, I just extend that olive branch to Keys for Black Wealth. I think you guys are doing some fantastic work, and you guys know you got me. You can call me anytime if you need anything on my end. I'm here. I'm supporting the movement. I just love what you guys are doing as we look at the Juneteenth, and happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. That's important. And celebrating the Juneteenth weekend at a time like this, to where, that was our last ancestors that got to punch their ticket on the freedom train. So we don't never want to lose that. That's a Langston Hughes poem, and that's a reference that Dr. Joseph L. White taught me about getting on that freedom train. So that's important. And that's where that started, from 1865, so moving forward, right? So if you can understand generations moving in 40 years, the first generation that got free were the architects of Black Wall Street. So within that span, punching that ticket on the freedom train, look what your people can do when they get free. Look, that was their creation off of that first generation.
You're going in right now.
From Black Wall Street was your Dr. Martin Luther King and your Malcolm X and your Rosa Parks. So you can see the generations moving. So now this generation has an opportunity of a lifetime with what they're doing. And I'm just really proud of them with their ability to mobilize on a global scale. So yeah, it's just really, really fantastic stuff.
Yeah, you've been spitting some fire. I know.
I have to give my hand a rest.
So, just lastly, I do want to pose this question to you, and then just tell people where they can find you at, and go from here. But the racial wealth gap, that's, how big that is, and I know that is a monumental thing, and we're Keys of Black Wealth, that is the elephant that we want to eat. So if you were advising us on that racial wealth gap and the best ways to go about it, what would you say?
Well, you said it's that elephant you want to eat. So you have to take on the mindset of a lion, right? The lion's the king of the jungle. So everybody sees the elephant as the barrier, but he sees the elephant as lunch. So totally different mindset when you see it. But what I would advise you to, a lot of that is the policy, right? Policy guides practice. Practice, policy doesn't follow practice. It's the other way around. So you have to see why things are being funded the way they are. So, right. So we can't ever stop questioning. Questioning opens the doors to possibilities. Why did this get funded this way? Why is there such a wealth gap, right? We know that systemic racism is the root cause of a wealth gap. When you don't have generational wealth being passed down, you're kind of behind the 8 ball, right? And poverty is only a circumstance and a condition that can be changed over time. People have to they have to unlearn what they've learned. And what I mean by that is we have to stop accepting oppression like the man is nothing else I can do. I just see my people so disgusted and beat up over the amount of challenges that they've been through, to where they've just accepted oppression. What you do matters as much as what you accept. So you got to stop accepting that.
Where's the keys at, man? Y'all ain't dropping those 7s. Y'all are disrespecting them right now. Y'all are not dropping those 7s.
So that's kind of what I would advise people to do, to continue to research why, because the spending is there. There shouldn't be a wealth gap, but you got to understand that, the Federal Reserve just printed $3 trillion in this stimulus. So now if I'm spending $1.5 trillion in spending power, the Federal Reserve, is that systemic racism or what? So you're going to double the entire Black community's spending power with one print. I can't think of a president who printed that much money at once. Right. And he's got a ticket in his pocket for another $2 trillion to print later. So now we're seeing, so how is this going to trickle down? I think, like I said, everybody has to know their lane. Like direct action is a protest, right? And we know there's a difference between a protester and a looter. But now we need people in those other lanes. Don't just look at one area. Everybody has to spread out. I'm going in this policy area. I'm going in the business finance committee, so I can start to regulate why the dollars aren't coming in my community when there's a clear indication that we're spending them.
Yeah.
The other thing that we have to understand is the dollar only stays in the Black community for about 6 minutes. In other communities, Japanese community or wherever, you might see 30 days of that same thing in that community. So our money is leaving out faster than we can actually get it in. And the other thing I can share with you is that analogy with the dollar from the report from The Economist. A dollar of white wealth is 8 cents. So when they say 10 times as far, you need $12.50 to match the $1. So that's the creation of the wealth gap. Your dollar is 8 cents. By the time you pay taxes and everything you do, that's probably 6 or 5 cents. So those are some of the inequalities that we have to address. That's economic opportunity that we need to really look at.
Right.
Why is that happening? Because the money's clearly being spent. Where's it? We track it. Where is it going? Because it's not staying in the community. So we have to look at our spending habits, right? And it's like we have to understand the bus boycott lasted 382 days. It's not quick. You got to stay on course, stay on message. So I think we're there. We're at a tipping point of transformation, but we have to spread out. We got to make sure we're addressing these other areas. You can't do race without poverty because it's too much. You got to address them in combination, not isolate.
I promise you, literally, you've been in our conversations that we've been having. That's why we're going off right now, because it's like we knew. I mean, somebody gets it, and these are the conversations we have, and like the fact that we have to prove this. I mean, it's so obvious. Yeah. It's not rocket science. So,
but that's the ignorance line, Brandy.
That's the ignorance line,
right? Yep. Like, so if I have to keep saying, I'm gonna repeat it because the truth won't change.
Yep.
You called to do this summit next year. I'm gonna say the same thing to you.
Absolutely.
I tell y'all yesterday, Brandy, so you got to keep telling people that they were like, why David keep repeating what I just said? Because if I don't say it 3 times to you, you're not even going to even think about remembering it.
Yeah.
Yep. Man, we can go all day right here. I don't even want to change the channel. I feel like I'm just like, this is amazing. I can't believe they're going off in the 7s. They're going off in the 7s. They're going off in the chat. But like, I mean, just the fact that we've had the opportunity to like absorb, you know what I'm saying, some of your mind right now. This has just been a blessing. Thank you so much for blessing Keys to Black Wealth, our participants, everyone. We have people from all across the globe that just got to hear you kind of just share your thoughts, your philosophies, and then also some action steps on what's going on right now as our in our current state, the current state of Black America, you know what I'm saying, and even the globe. So yeah, I hope everybody has the replay, because this is definitely another one that you got to go back and watch so you can digest it and really unpack, because some of the keys that you just dropped for us is definitely solution based. And if we implement some of these strategies into the way that we work and some of the output that we're doing, then we can definitely get some things done.
Yeah, that's for sure. I just thank everybody for listening in, and Keys to Black Wealth, and you guys have done just a wonderful job putting this virtual experience together. I just invite people to continue to stay on their journey and continue to learn and grow as you figure out what your industry is. Like I said, I don't know your situation or what business model you're looking at, but there are some things that are established in terms of principles that you can follow, right, as a blueprint that have worked repeatedly. Being consistent, being true to yourself, those are things you already know. Sometimes you have to hear it as confirmation or validation from other people who are doing it. So I just think that that's really the mindset that I want to share with people. But I invite people to continue to review their processes that they put in place for their business. But also educating yourself doesn't have to be in an institutional setting. You could do that from remote. You could do that at, sometimes it's free seminars, right? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So there's so many ways.
I got one too.
There's so many ways that we can do it, but I just continue, you guys. I want to feed forward. Like I said, I'm not interested in some of the feedback. I want to feed forward so that you guys can keep moving. And that's the most important step that I think as a key for business is like, I missed this one. Now feed me forward. How can I get to the next step? Right. So I think that that's really important.
Dr. Hill, before you go, I wanted to make sure you got to meet our co-founder. There's 4 of us, so I don't know if you got to meet Lamar. This is our CMO, our Chief Marketing Officer, Lamar Pugsley, co-founder.
Lamar. So you're the tech brain behind the whole operation, huh?
Frank, where you at, Frank?
I'm trying to be. I'm constantly learning. I'm just like you. It's a constant educational process for me. So I'm constantly.
Great. Yeah, I learned some stuff on this screen too. They were teaching me how to make sure I can do all my tech stuff. So I give myself permission not to know everything, and that's for sure. So,
man, I appreciate the keys and the way you was able to break that down. I don't think that we value a valid explanation with some real what's the word I'm looking for? Quality behind it. Just really bringing it with some facts, and it's just more than just words. So definitely appreciate that.
Okay, for sure. Well, it's always a pleasure. You guys got me. You guys know I'm not hard to find. So, yeah. Contact me if you need anything.
So we bring it on Frank. Frank is also our 4th co-founder. He's the man behind the brand. So he creates all the graphics, creative design. We wanted you to meet him.
So Frank needs my mailing address, I take it. So that's oh, okay. I've been waiting. I've been waiting.
Yep. So we did write an ebook, and we would love for you to read it. We're gonna do a series on it, and we would love to get your feedback on it and stuff. But it's our 7 keys to generational wealth, and we did have policy and law in there as well. Too.
Okay.
So we got a lot of from awareness to ownership, and we would love your feedback on it and just help us grow this series.
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah.
If you need anything from me, I definitely will give you my feedback to help you feed forward, and we'll go from there. Because I think that's those little tools and those pocketbooks are what really works. The little pocket guides.
Yeah.
I don't want to overwhelm. Sometimes school, because school sometimes puts up a mirror just to show you that you don't know how to do things and never gives you a solution on how to fix it. So, and I understand that, and I want to be a disruptor in that kind of environment. Sometimes it's those little guides along the way that help you see it. Because I want to put it in your gut. Like, I want you to hold on to, oh, I got it now. This is the process that I've been looking for, right? And sometimes that epiphany shows up at different times in a different space. It might not be in a classroom.
Yeah.
If there's a trauma that happens, there's historical trauma. I mean, there's so many things that prevent people from entering the school. I don't know how to navigate the higher education space. Because this office to this, I mean, it just sometimes creates a challenge for people. It's not that they don't want to learn. It's just like, I need a different kind of environment for me to thrive.
Yeah. So again, we will send that over to you for anybody in the chat. It is on our website, www.keystoblackwellsummit.com. The 7 keys to generational wealth just dropped this weekend. So we just actually launched it this weekend. But Dr. Hill, we would love to have your feedback on the book.
Absolutely.
Maybe even a forward or something like that if you feel compelled.
Oh, look at you.
Okay. Randy taught me this concept called BAM Fam. Book a meeting from a meeting. So we in a meeting with you. She already booking the next meeting.
I love it. I like that. Man, you guys are on fire, man. I love it. Whatever I can do to help, please. Yeah. This is, I would just do this anyway. This is what I do. I just think it's so much bigger than me. Like I said, I just want, if I, in a war, sometimes the bridge gets knocked out first. Because I feel like I understand the generations before me to help with you guys. So if I'm the bridge, I'm more than willing to take on that, being keepers of the flame. So absolutely.
Respect.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You guys
stay with us. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. We'll be here. Happy
Father's Day to all the fathers out there too.
Yeah. All 3 of us. All 3. We on there. Thank you.